We are live. What is up, everybody? I'm back off the injury report live stream onto the DFS Week 2 main slate preview live stream. I'm your host, Andrew Erickson, joined as always every week, Jared Evans, PFF_Jared on Twitter. Jared, did you win $1 million last week?
I didn't, but okay. That doesn't mean that it can't happen this week. We
Yes,
were
but
close.
you cannot win $1 million by playing Will Fuller this week. Unfortunately, our guy is out. It looked kind of grim. Brian Flores like, yeah, we're not sure if he's going to come back. Is he going to play the season? He's like, I'm not sure. So that's some red flags. But again, I took some overs on some Devontae Parker props the minute that the news hit. So
That's smart. That was smart.
I'm getting into that prop game with prize picks, which is pretty fun. So I also took the under on Josh Jacobs rushing yards. And now, dude, it's a new curse. So that first of all, there was the TikTok curse where every time I did a TikTok for a player, he would get injured. And now every time I put an under for a running back, they're inactive. Week 1, Zach Moss, inactive. Week 2,
and you
Josh
can't
Jacobs.
Get paid out for
no,
inactives.
I know. It's super frustrating because I'm like nailing these picks, but these running backs are like, no, we're just not going to suit. He's not going to suit up. So I'm winning these unders technically, but it's more of a technicality than anything else. But
you should take Peyton Barber's over this week.
I can't do that. I cannot do anything when it comes to Peyton Barber, but let's get into this slate. Again, we have massive game totals, especially in the later portion of the slate at the 4 o'clock window. We have all games, 4 games that have over 50-point totals. We have one 50-point total. I think it depends on where your book is. I think the 49ers-Eagles game is the highest of the early games. Some books has it at 50. I think that most places have like 48 or 49, but it's on the fringe. But basically all the high-powered games are at the end, and then we have ones in the beginning that are that are not nearly as high scoring. So at the quarter, we'll go position by position like we did last week. So quarterback, who do you like at quarterback this week? Are you going after one of these high price guys that's playing in these high scoring games, or is someone in the early window that you're really trying to lock on to? I know like the rostership projections that we have up have Herbert and Josh Allen as the most 2 rostered players. Are you leaning towards one of those guys, or are you trying to go a little bit deeper?
So yeah, I mean the decision point for this main slate is what are you going to do with the Cowboys-Chargers game? It's got 55-point total. You rarely see totals that high, highest on the weekend. And are you going to play Dak or Herbert? They're both awesome. They both are probably going to be 2 of the highest scoring quarterbacks on the slate. But as we see every Sunday, weird stuff happens. And they're cheap. They don't even have to like go for 35 plus points to 4x their salaries. So it's going to be hard to get away from them unless you're building kind of crazy game stacks from one of the other 50-point total games. I feel like it's going to be hard this week to go cheap at quarterback and try to get a 30 or 35-point score because 1 or 2 of these other guys could go for 35 plus, and then you're drawing dead almost.
Yeah, I feel like if you go cheap at quarterback, then you're going to be in the dust. Like, I don't think a 25-point game from Teddy Bridgewater, even though if he, 5X's or whatever his salary, and that's great value, you're just not going to be able to beat the teams that score 40 points with their, because we're going to see a quarterback do that. Like we saw, and that's the thing too. Like you look at last week, what were the rosters? If you look at any of the tournaments you played last week, who were the winning lineups? It was Kyler Murray. It was Patrick Mahomes. Like it wasn't people galaxy braining the quarterback positions. Like, there are values that you can have at the other positions, and especially at wide receiver. So people paid up a quarterback. I think that's kind of the same thing here because there are some values that you can find on this slate. And I think that just these mobile quarterbacks just throw all the time they just score too many points that you need to have one of these guys either playing in a high scoring environment or one that's just basically in an onslaught position to kind of have a chance of taking down one of these tournaments. So are you locking in on a particular quarterback? I know I like Herbert the most. Again, he is actually, so I think he actually has the highest rostership of all the quarterbacks. I don't really care because I think that he's the best play. Like, sorry. Like, again, I'm going to have to play some chalk eventually in tournaments or whatever, but how are you going to play Justin Herbert matters a lot. What kind of Dallas players are you going to bring back? Is it going to be Mike Williams and Keenan Allen? Or is it going to be just Keenan Allen? Or is it going to be Austin Eckler? Like, there's a lot of ways to make your lineup different. So I don't mind, especially at the quarterback position where rostership is pretty flat across the board anyway. Like, we're going to see it, at least from what I can recognize. It's basically, it could be pretty flat between the top 5 guys. I know, like, I have like 5 main guys that I'm like looking at as like potential options. So Herbert, Prescott, Kyler Murray, Russ, and Jalen Hurts are kind of the guys I'm locking. And that doesn't even include like Tom Brady and Josh Allen, who I both also know are like really good plays as well. So you can go in a lot of different directions, which means I don't really think that we are going to see something get so fixated where it's like, oh my God, 30% on Justin Herbert. I don't think that's going to be the case because there are going to be people that, oh, well, I'm going to go with Brady because Herbert's going to be higher rostered. I don't think it really matters. I think that you just go with the quarterback that you can kind of build the best team around in addition to that quarterback. And I think Herbert at his salary with the conditions he's playing with his receivers that you can stack with him, I think that he's in a really good spot. So Herbert, I mean, what? PFF's 4th highest graded quarterback last week, 4th in expected fantasy points per game. And the Dallas is not going to be able to pressure him at all. Like he is going to have all day to freaking throw back there, and he's just going to rip this Cowboys defense to shreds. So, and we know Dak's going to keep pace. Like, and that's where we have some concerns with these other matchups where is Kirk Cousins going to be able to keep pace? We saw that Arizona defense feast with a lead last week. You know, that could be Kirk Cousins. The Vikings could turn into the Tennessee Titans offense. And then you have Russell Wilson. Yes, is he going to cook? Potentially, but he also cooked last week and he wasn't a tournament winning play last week, even though he threw 4 touchdowns because he didn't have the yardage to kind of go along with it. So there are some outs with some of these other guys. I just think that's why I like Herbert the most. But Jared, I want to hear your thoughts because I know you like to be contrarian as a tournament guru yourself. So tell me why I shouldn't play Herbert, or tell me if I'm right.
So, I mean, it's interesting because like last week I was locked in on Kyler Murray. That was my guy. And he was still like the 3rd most popular quarterback, but at only like 8% ownership. So even at a onesie position like QB, the ownership is going to be so widespread that you really don't need to go too off the board to kind of be thinking contrarian. I agree with you that Dak and Herbert are the 2 best plays kind of in a vacuum, but that game, maybe it doesn't shoot out. Weird things happen in the NFL, and I definitely want to have lineups that use either Ezekiel Elliott or Austin Eckler. And in those lineups, I'm going to want to go in a different direction at quarterback because I'm basically saying the touchdowns are going to be coming through the ground in that game, or it might be a little lower scoring than other people expect. So the quarterbacks that I was thinking about in those scenarios was, you mentioned Russell Wilson, how he didn't have like a GPP smash winning score last week, but I think the Titans will do a better job. They laid an egg last week, whatever that happens. They've got too many really awesome skill players to not keep up on offense. And using Russ gets you off the chalky Chris Carson because he's also going to be quite popular this week. I've seen him carry a bit of internet hype these days. And his stacking up partners are like so obvious. Like it's DK Metcalf or Tyler Lockett. Like with Herbert, you got like Jalen Guyton to worry about, Mike Williams, Keenan Allen, Austin Eckler, Jared Cook. There's just a lot of different ways that the touchdowns could get spread around. And kind of the same thing with Dak between Cedric Wilson, the tight ends, Zeke, Amari, CD. But with Russ, if he goes nuclear, it's probably because he's throwing 3 touchdowns to DK Metcalf. So I think the GPP upside for Russ is pretty strong. And then on the other side, I also like Tannehill too, if you want to save like $1,200 and then say, oh, that game is going to shoot out. DK catches 3 touchdowns. Well, Tannehill's probably throwing for 5 and maybe he, runs one in also. So that is probably what I'm thinking if I'm trying to get a little weirder at QB. Other guys that like cross through my mind are Matt Ryan in the 5K range. I know that's a little weird, but teams just don't teams don't run against the Bucs. So maybe Matt Ryan does like a light version of what Dak did last week and Calvin Ridley catches 3 touchdowns and goes for 180. It's possible. But otherwise, I'm not trying to get too weird at quarterback. You don't have to. I had a lot more interest in Josh Allen before the Will Fuller tragedy here. I think that game is probably less likely to shoot out without Will Fuller's deep prowess. But that's kind of what I'm thinking at QB.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely want to play some Russell Wilson this week. But again, if I'm doing a single bullet, I'm going Herbert. Like, that's my guy. You have to take a stand because, like you said, there's a lot of ways you can go here. And eventually, you just got to pick a quarterback. And I have a lot of confidence if Herbert throws for 3 touchdowns and 300 passing yards, that the rest of my lineup will find a way to bring me to the promised land. So that's why I like Herbert there. And then also, like, if you're playing cash games, I think Jalen Hurts, we talked about this on the DFS podcast with Ian. And I think it's just really obvious. He's 6,500. His price didn't move. The 49ers are missing like half their secondary. They're missing 2 of their starters from last week. So yeah, they have like a good pass rush, but besides that, Hurts rushed for 60 yards last week. He's really safe. He's like, again, if you're like just kind of starting to play DFS, you really want, if you play on Yahoo DFS, like especially for cash games, like the prices are all over the place. Like you can play like super stack lineups, and if you know what you're doing, you understand how targets work, you understand values, like that's where you can actually just really win cash games really very, very easily. So I would recommend, if you're struggling on DraftKings where there are more sharp players, or on FanDuel, then I would recommend, switching over to Yahoo. Yes, there's not these massive prizes in tournaments, but if you're just playing cash games, I think Yahoo is a nice alternative that you can kind of go to. But yeah, I'm not paying down a quarterback, not doing. Yes, we'll probably see some guys pop, but I'm paying up. I want to get one of these studs in one of these prime matchups. Let's go to running back here. I know you talked about Chris Carson. Yeah, and it's crazy because like a couple days ago, I thought Chris Carson would be like a pivot off of like Najee Harris, but now he's like locked in with Najee Harris as the chalky play at running back. I mean, if they're both going to be like chalkier, I would just play Carson straight up over Najee Harris. I have no issue with or qualms with that. Chris Carson is coming off a good game. Like I know, like we always kind of look for like buy low opportunities. Like, oh, this guy sucked last week, I want him to perform this week. But Chris Carson was good last week. He just didn't score any touchdowns. So I think that he's in a really good prime position again against the Titans, and I think that it makes a lot of sense, even if you're playing with. If you're going with the Chargers Dallas stack, to have Chris Carson in that lineup, because you're betting on, okay, Russell Wilson's not going to fire. Like he's not going to fire, a couple touchdowns to DK Metcalf. It's going to be a Chris Carson game. So that kind of gives you leverage over, okay, if this game shoots out, the Chargers Dallas game, okay, how do I make sure that I have the most leverage over the other games that could potentially shoot out? Okay, Chris Carson takes over that game. Okay, now I don't have to worry about all those Russ teams potentially catching up to me. So I think that makes a lot of sense to play Chris Carson, even if he is higher owned, because you probably won't see them both in a lot of lineups. Maybe not Najee Harris and Chris Carson. Maybe you will. But I mean, I still like Carson. Again, if they're both going to be really rostered highly, then I'm still going to lean Carson there. Nick Chubb comes in number 3rd. I talked about him as more of a fade probably for some of these other running backs. What about you, Jared? What about some of these running backs kind of stand out here that you're looking to target or to fade? In this slate?
I mean, last week was the week to play Nick Chubb. I wrote that up. Like those yardage and touchdown guys, you play them when they're 5% owned. You don't play them when they're 20% owned, because Chubb goes for 95 yards and no touchdowns. That's a solid game for NFL purposes, but that's like 9 fantasy points. Even if he scores once or twice there, that's still not enough to pay off 7.8K salary. So definitely not a week to play Chubb, in my opinion, even though he can run for 200 yards and 3 touchdowns. He has that ceiling, but the floor is just too low, I think, at that high ownership. You mentioned the Carson Najee pairing. I feel like that'll be like the chalk build, right? It'll be Justin Herbert or Dak, then it'll be Carson and Najee Harris, and then it'll be like Amari Cooper, CeeDee Lamb, Keenan Allen, some like combination of those.
It's a lot of salary.
Yeah, and then like a punt and a cheap tight end and cheap defense, right? Because there's no one above 7K, I think, in all those players. So just like a straight 6K medium build. I don't know. I really like Ezekiel Elliott this week. I think he's interesting from kind of a tournament leverage perspective. The same concept that you were talking about with Chris Carson and the other game. But the difference is that I don't think Russell Wilson and DK and Lockett are going to all carry that much ownership, but all the ownership in the Cowboys is going to be from Amari Cooper and CeeDee Lamb and Dak. So if Zeke is the one who goes off, then all those other lineups are busting and you're shooting past them at like 8% ownership. And he's priced right at the same area as Najee and Carson. So it's just like such a smart pivot, I think, from like a strategic perspective.
Yeah, I like Zeke a lot. I mean, I was the one that had Zeke as a top 3 running back in season-long league. So, of course, I'm going to, get behind playing him at $6,200.
Yeah, right? Like, has he ever been that cheap?
No, I unless it was like at some point last year when he was just total dust and nobody could, because like nobody was playing him, because that's what it's all related to. It's matters of, the matchup is factored in, and it's also how rostered a player is the week before, and it changes a little bit because of like showdown slates. I don't know how exactly the formula works, but rostership percentage factors in a lot, and that's why you'll see like Kyle Pitts, his percentage went way up because he was really high roster last week, not because he was really good last week. So again, we'll talk about tight ends a little bit later on, but Yeah, I get Zeke. I think the matchup's also good for Zeke. I did some digging looking at these Los Angeles Chargers defense, and they invite the running game. They do not stack the box whatsoever. Antonio Gibson had the most rushing attempts against less than 8-man fronts in week 1. That's what Zeke is running into. Like, they're not stacking the box. They're not trying to stop the run because they're a defense that understands if they're running against us, we're winning. Like, that's a
Brandon
win
Staley's
for us.
smart. Brandon Staley knows what he's doing. Like,
yes, they don't want to give up a lot of deep plays. They want to keep things in front of them, and they want to control the pace of play. So I think that that doesn't really necessarily affect like how I feel about Dak. Like, I think Dak's still going to find a way, but Dak's going to have to be more patient. I think, like, he's not going to just take shot after shot. Like, he's going to have to work more meticulously down the field, and he's going to have to probably try to at least. I mean, if they have 6 guys in the box, he's going to be like, well, I got to give it to Zeke. Like, I got to feed him. Like, he's going to be able to rush for 5 or 6 yards of carry here. So I definitely can get behind Zeke, especially because he's so cheap, and going after the guys that sucked on a prime time or an island game is kind of just like, a rinse and repeat kind of formula that just like always seems to work because everyone sees it and you just overblow everything. But all of Zeke's peripherals were great. His snap share, his routes run. So again, I think that it makes a ton of sense there. But I have to admit that the best leverage play at running back is by far Jonathan Taylor at his 3.7% rostership. Again, he's like the guy I was shocked the most to see below 5% because it's the Rams defense that people are just absolutely, they just see Rams defense. They think Aaron Donald, like, oh my God, like I cannot play Jonathan Taylor. But when you look at David Montgomery, what he did against this Rams defense just last week, and David Montgomery, look, I mean, I don't think Jonathan Taylor and David Montgomery are in the same freaking tier in terms of like skill running back. I think that Jonathan Taylor is a vastly superior running back to David Montgomery. And similar to how I talked about the Chargers, the Rams do the same thing. They don't stack the box. They're inviting the running game. That's why David Montgomery was able to be so efficient. He broke off a couple big runs because they're not looking to try to stop the run. So I think Jonathan Taylor, again, him and Derrick Henry are the both guys that are like priced like below 5% that have that slate breaking upside. And we've got more injury report data or news that has like Pittman and Campbell are both like banged up now. Like, they have no choice but to like use their running backs in all facets of the game. Like, what else is Carson Wentz going to do? Like, he's not going to be able to throw the ball. So people will think, oh, he's going to get bottled up. But, Frank Reich's smart enough to design plays to get Jonathan Taylor the ball on screens, on rushes. They still have a good offensive line. So yeah, I mean, Jonathan Taylor at 7,200, especially because he's $1,000 higher than all those 6K running backs. He gives you a unique build because of his price. I think he makes a lot of sense. Because I thought Zeke would be less rostered. I thought Chris Carson was going to be less rostered too, but that's not the case at all. So I think, yeah, Jonathan Taylor is going to definitely be a guy I'm going to play in a lot of tournaments.
I like that. I wasn't really thinking about Taylor, and just having this conversation right now made me think that Nyheim Hines also is kind of interesting at running back. He's 4,700, and everybody knows that Stafford is a baller now. He's got really good weapons, and the Rams are 3.5-point road favorites. Like, if the Rams jump out to a big lead, like Nyheim Hines could get like 10 targets.
I mean, Jonathan Taylor also showed me everything I was worried about him heading into the season was like, what's his pass game role going to be? Like, what's going to happen if they fall behind? It's like, he got 6 targets and 6 catches when they fell behind in week 1. Like, that's exactly what I wanted to see from him. It's like, okay, this is great. Like, and his price also went down, like, because nobody played him last week because he was like at 8K. So he's cheaper now. I think that he provides a lot of, I think that he's a really good spot. And he also plays in the early games too. So you're going to know kind of what your lineup, you can play more chalky plays. Like you said, like, if you can stack this Chargers Dallas game and, eat all the chalk you want, knowing that you have a Jonathan Taylor at sub 5%, with 30 points or whatever he scores in the early game, locked and loaded. You're like, oh, I'm good. Like, I'm just going to sit back and watch the fireworks because I'm all set because I got my low on guy that made my lineup different. So I think, Taylor, I think is a good play. And I like Hines, as I mentioned as well. I mean, it's PPR. He catches passes. Mm-hmm. He caught 6 passes last week. That's why I took the prop over on him from 3 receptions. Go check out the article on Prize Picks. So yeah, I like that.
That's smart. A couple other guys that are interesting are Joe Mixon. I wonder how popular he'll be against the Bears defense, but he's like a complete bell cow. He had like 33 touches last week. So 7K for a bell cow like that is definitely interesting. And then Derrick Henry, man, I'm still going to play him. No, like 5% ownership, whatever, I'll definitely have some Derrick Henry lineups. Like either he'll score 10 fantasy points or maybe he'll scores 40, whatever.
The big dog. Yep. Yeah. It's
Gotta have some big dog. And then CMC and Kamara also, I feel like gotta play some of them, especially again, because they're not going to be that popular this week, which is kind of weird to say. They're really expensive, but they're CMC and Alvin Kamara. Like they're awesome. Maybe even play them together. They probably have positive correlation. The rest of your lineup might stink, but or like play them with receivers on the other team would make sense.
And then I'll just mention one other guy. So Kareem Hunt, I think you hit the nail on the head with like not really playing Nick Chubb. It doesn't make a lot of sense because, he split snaps with Kareem Hunt almost 50-50. It would not surprise me at all if Kareem Hunt has the exact same type of output as Nick Chubb does, except he costs significantly less salary. You could see Kareem Hunt score more touchdowns. Like there's so many outs. And also, if things like you mentioned, weird things happen. So what if, okay, Baker Mayfield fumbles and then they get a pick six and now they're down 14-0. Like who's going to be in the game? Kareem Hunt, not Nick Chubb necessarily. So I think Kareem Hunt has a lot of outs in his profile. I mean, they're also playing the Texas defense. Like if they're up big, like they're not just going to give Nick Chubb 30 carries. Like they're going to give Kareem Hunt carries too. Last time these teams played the Texans, both Kareem Hunt and Nick Chubb rushed for 100 yards. So I think that they honestly have a very similar ceiling. And it's just that Hunt is less rostered and is cheaper, and he lets you do more things with your lineup. So, yeah, I cannot. Again, if you want to play Nick Chubb in cash, I think that's fine. But in tournaments, I think Hunt would be a better play, and he's coming at sub 10%.
Also with the blowout stuff, like if the Browns go up by 4 touchdowns, they had to rack up a crap ton of fantasy points to score those 4 touchdowns. So Hunt will be involved in that too.
Oh yeah, because he sees red zone usage.
Yeah.
Like, it's not like they just exclude. I mean, their roles are very similar. Like they don't see one. Obviously, Chubb is the starter, so he plays and gets the majority of touches. But Hunt still gets pass game work. And there was a carry. I was rewatching this game. Chubb was in at the goal line, first down. He ran it in, or he didn't score. He came out, and then Kareem Hunt on second down ran the ball in and got the touchdown. Like that's going to happen. We saw it last week. So I think Hunt. Yeah, I think Hunt is a better play for sure than Nick Chubb.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on to wide receivers. Obviously there's all the Chargers and Dallas and these great guys. Let's talk about Cooper Kupp. So is the move just okay? You play Cooper Kupp in cash because he's wicked cheap, $6,000, 20% rostership, and is it you just totally fade him and you just play Robert Woods in tournaments? Is that because the matchup is so good. You look at what the Colts gave up to slot receivers last week, and I think it was like 155 passer rating. It was basically perfect. And we know Cooper Kupp mans the slot for the Los Angeles Rams. Is this chalk that you want to eat? I know you hate chalk. It's disgusting. So I already know the answer to that question, but do you feel confident about the pivot of Robert Woods? You're just like, no, I'll find other receivers. I don't necessarily need to play Robert Woods over Cooper. I just won't play either of them.
Yeah, I'm definitely not playing Cooper Kupp this week as as the most popular receiver. If he buries me, then Cooper Kupp buries me. I mean, Stafford is just going to spread the ball around. There's a scenario where he throws for 4 touchdowns and it's to 4 different receivers and nobody has this true slate busting score. So I'm not too worried about that. Robert Woods is pretty good leverage. You could even play like a Deshaun Jackson would probably be smart also. But I'm not worried about Cooper Kupp.
Well, no, I think the way you described it there is that he's going to spread the ball. That kind of makes me because again, I don't know how great this game environment is. I guess maybe the move would be I do play if I want to play Jonathan Taylor. It is with Robert Woods as the bring back option, but I don't know if you necessarily need to bring it back. Like Jonathan Taylor doesn't need to play in this insane shootout to really have a game. We know what his skill set is. He's going to rush for a lot of yards and he's going to score touchdowns. So I don't necessarily think that he needs, I don't think you need to stack a lot of these early window games. Again, the skinny stack I think works a lot. But yeah, I mean, if I'm going to fade Cooper Kupp, that doesn't necessarily mean I have to jam in Robert Woods because there are a lot of other 6K receivers I really like. I want to find money to spend and he's at 5.7. So again, if I can find more salary to move up to a guy like a Mike Williams, Jarvis Landry, guys that are still sub 10%. It's not like Robert Woods is going. I mean, he's at 5. So yeah, not really many people are playing him, but I mean, I can find the money to play Julio Jones. I want to play freaking Julio. Dude, Julio Jones chalk never hits, number one. Like, he always sucks whenever he's like popular. I remember this from my days playing DFS like 5 years ago. I'm like, oh my God, like Julio, and then he sucks. And then you play him the next week, he just goes for like 300 receiving yards. Like, yeah, I'm going to find the money to get up from Robert Woods to Julio Jones, like point blank, no matter what.
Yeah, I mean, also, like, back to Kupp, he just had an 100-yard game, so he got the bonus and a touchdown, and he had 7 catches, and he scored 26 DK points. Like, at 6K, you can find 26 DraftKings points from a receiver. Like,
social team, graphic that up. Let's go. Get it up.
So I'm not worried about that.
All right, I like that. I like that call. The Dallas Chargers receivers. Do you have a lean towards? I mean, you're gonna have to play some of them. Like, I mean, or are you gonna just fade all of them, Jared? Like,
I'm not that crazy. I'm not that crazy.
So, is there one that you're actually leaning towards? Because again, like they're all high rostered for the most part. Mike Williams is a little bit lower at 6.2. I think it's actually because his price is kind of high. Like, I'm kind of surprised he's at 6,100. That's the same price as Mike Evans. And if I were to ask anybody like, who would think is better, Mike Evans or Mike Williams, I think it'd be a consensus take on Mike Evans as being like the superior option. You look at where they were drafted in like season long leagues. Mike Evans was like a 4th round pick. Mike Williams was like a guy you take in like round 8 or round 7, sometimes even later than that. So to see his price really spiked up here, I think it's kind of lessening the flames on him. And I know that there is a scenario where he does match up against Trevon Diggs, who did, really well against Mike Evans last week. So I do see scenarios where Mike Williams necessarily doesn't fire in this matchup, which I would think is why I think that going Keenan Allen and Jalen Guyton along with Justin Herbert is an interesting way to stack this game. Jalen Guyton looked like the number 3 receiver. He actually looked really good. Like, I am the biggest Josh Palmer stan that you will find in the universe. And I was pissed because Jalen Guyton looked good on Sunday, because he was terrible last year. He was the classic, running sprints and doing absolutely nothing with them. But give credit to the guy. He got better. He improved. I was impressed by what I saw. He had a decent game. He had 5 targets, 3 catches for 49 yards, and he's 3.1K. And he's potential great leverage off of Cedric Wilson, who could become a more chalky receiver at 3.1. So I think that's a good, interesting way to stack it. I still like Mike Williams. I mean, and then from the Cowboys side, I prefer Lamb over Cooper straight up. The rostership projections prefer Cooper over Lamb. I mean, they're probably going to be about the same anyway, so I don't think that's really a difference. But I kind of like going with a Lamb and Zeke approach, not necessarily stacking both top Cowboys wide receivers, but bringing in one of the running backs. So I like Lamb just because, dude, the guy missed out on so many opportunities last week. He had 3 end zone targets, 0 touchdowns in the end zone. He had 4 deep targets, 0 deep catches. And like I talked about before, how the Rams like to keep things in front of them. That if he's operating out of the slot, which is what he's done traditionally at times, like he could eat up under the middle of the field. I think he profiles more as that receiver than Cooper playing on the outside. So I do prefer Lamb in a vacuum to Amari Cooper if I can only play one of them. What say you?
Yeah, I agree with a lot of what you said. I think for the Cowboys side, it's a coin flip between Amari Cooper and CeeDee Lamb. There's nothing really in the numbers that's going to point you towards either one. I think that, like, Amari Cooper had the big game last week, so it kind of just makes sense that it might be CeeDee Lamb this week. So I feel like when Joe Schmo is building his lineup, he's going to be like, oh, CeeDee Lamb is going to be the obvious one. And he's like the hype player, right? He's a little cheaper. So I could see Amari Cooper coming in at like less ownership than Lamb, even though that's not what it says right now. So in that case, I'd rather play Cooper.
All right. I mean, it's going to be flat across. It's going to be.
Yeah.
I think it's really.
Yeah. You're probably right.
It's really tough to like be like, oh, the entire field's going to be all over Lamb, or like, oh, like there's not, like you said, there really isn't any substantial evidence that will make it. So I mean, all of them are going to be, especially with Keenan Allen too. So
yeah, just make 2 lineups. if you're building a Cowboys and Chargers stack, just like dupe the lineup and then swap out Cooper for CeeDee and then like swap the defense or something. Like that is actually what you should be doing.
Hey, that worked when we did it was Jameis Winston and the Bucs receivers. Every week it was like
seriously.
Mike Evans and Chris Godwin, just like make one lineup with one guy, make one lineup with the other guy, and you'll be all set.
Exactly. And then on the Chargers, I'd definitely rather play Keenan Allen and Mike Williams. I think the Diggs matchup makes sense. I think you'll see him shadow Mike Williams, and then you'll get Keenan Allen in the slot, and then maybe like Anthony Brown will match up against Guyton, so he might be pretty interesting.
He's so bad.
Antonio Brown like murdered him.
He's so bad. Anthony Brown is horrendous.
So I mean, Keenan and Mike Williams are just priced so close together. It's like a $900 difference. Like, just give me Keenan Allen.
Yeah,
I think.
I agree. I think Keenan Allen, and again, I don't know why Keenan Allen is always a guy that seemingly is always underrated anyway. And I think that this is going to be he seems like he needs like a historic game. Like he needs like a legendary game to put
Sometimes he gets like 20 targets. It happens.
Oh yeah. And especially with the fact that they're not featuring Eckler as much. And I know I talked about this with Nathan Yonke, and he brought up a really good point. It's the fact that Herbert was under pressure so much last year. Like the reason he was so good was because he was always dumping the ball off to Eckler. Like that was his like escape. But now that he has like elite offensive line, it's like, oh my God, like I can read the entire field. I can see Mike Williams like open 30 yards downfield, and I can just rip it with my giant arm instead of checking it down to Eckler, which worked last year. And it's also why he was like, why his pass rating was so high. And we're like, oh my God, this is not sustainable. It's like, no, it's just because like he rolls out, dumps it off to Eckler, who like breaks like 5 tackles and scores a touchdown. It's like, oh, sick. My pass rating is like amazing because I just dump it off to Eckler when I'm under pressure. So again, I don't think the days of like Eckler like seeing like those massive target shares might be gone. At least right now, we behind this offensive line, it's like elite. But again, we also saw Eckler get more goal line carries. So I didn't think that he's still in play, but I think I do prefer Zeke as because I do like Justin Herbert anyway more than Dak. So I like pairing Justin Herbert with Zeke as opposed to pairing him with Austin Eckler. Because if I'm going to be looking at the receivers, I want to get Mike Williams, Jalen Guyton, Keenan Allen as the main target guys, not necessarily Austin Eckler.
The Eckler thing is interesting. So I don't know if you saw that he's got like a fantasy podcast on Yahoo.
Yes.
And I saw that there was a clip on social today floating around where he was talking about his pass game role and how in week 1, they had a rookie left tackle with Rashawn Slater. So the game plan was, let's see how he does. Let's leave Eckler in to chip Chase Young a bit.
Oh no!
And throw off his pass rush. So that was not the game plan. And then he was like, I think you're going to see a little bit more of a pass game role now that Slater played well, and he's good to go. They have a little more confidence. Now, this was a fantasy football podcast. Take it with a grain of salt. But I definitely thought that was interesting.
I mean, Eckler's been pretty like he's been like pro fantasy football. Like, he's not like Josh Jacobs, or Josh Jacobs is like literally trying to troll fantasy managers. Where Eckler's like actually like trying to help. He's like, guys, like I'm not gonna get 0 targets next week. Like chill out. Like have faith in me. So I like hearing that as well. So yeah, I'm gonna definitely I'll definitely have to add Eckler up there in the lineups with Justin Herbert. Let's move away from the Dallas Chargers game. Talk about some of these other games. I know you mentioned Metcalf. I know I talked about AJ Brown, or we talked about Julio Jones and AJ Brown. I think those guys make a lot of sense with stacks with Seattle and Tennessee. Are there any one-off receivers you like? Any other skinny stacks? I know Mike Evans and Calvin Ridley really are appealing to me as, just kind of, I kind of almost start a build with those two guys and then just kind of work around that, where I know that there's going to be points scored in that game. Calvin Ridley, it seems like he's going to be set to smash. You have the Buccaneers without Sean Murphy-Bunting, and Carlton Davis is banged up. We know the targets are going to go to Calvin Ridley. Like we know that for sure. And after such a terrible game week 1, I think he's set to bounce back. And Mike Evans, again, Tom Brady's going to throw a lot of touchdowns in this game and a lot of yards. And who usually catches a lot of touchdowns is Mike Evans. The guy doesn't just get 1,000 yards every single season and just by doing nothing. Like he's going to have big games, and this seems like a good bounce back spot for him. Can you get on board like Ridley and Mike Evans kind of like skinny stacks? Or I know you talked about Matt Ryan. Do you really want a full game stack with Tom Brady or Matt Ryan with Falcons and Bucks?
Yeah, I mean, that little correlation combo, that makes a ton of sense. I like that a lot for sure. I'll definitely be playing a little bit of that. Evans is way too cheap. I mean, he's 6,100. Like you just don't see that. He's a 7K receiver usually. Other receivers that I was interested in, I wrote up Justin Jefferson in my article. I think he's a guy who's going to be coming with a lot less ownership than he should. The Vikings offense is so concentrated, and when they play in these pace-up games, usually one of Thielen or Jefferson kind of pops off for a monster score. So I think the odds of you getting a slate-busting score if you play one of Jefferson or Thielen, I think are pretty high, and Jefferson is probably the guy that I'd rather play. Cardinals secondary is not very good. So interested in that. Deontay Johnson is another guy that I wrote up that I really like this week as leverage off Najee Harris, who's probably going to be the highest owned running back on the slate. I think the Raiders defense is really nothing special. And if the Steelers score all their touchdowns through the air, like Deontay Johnson is their number one receiver. He's going to lead. He's going to lead in targets. And I think he matches up well with the type of coverage, the zone coverage that the Raiders run. So I like Deontay Johnson. And then I also think another guy that kind of has a lot of upside is DJ Moore. He's, I think, also the Panthers' number one receiver, and he makes a lot of sense paired with Alvin Kamara if you want to go that route. And then I was really excited to play Will Fuller at 4,800 this week, but that can't happen anymore. So I'd probably make my pivot there to either Jalen Waddle or Devontae Parker. I think Parker might be shadowed by Tre'Davious White, so I feel like Waddle might move to the slot a little more, and he might make a little more sense in that respect. And then on like the sub 4K range, I was looking at KJ Hamler. I think he could be really interesting as like a dart throw one-off, not really play anybody else from that game, but kind of just hope Hamler catches a long touchdown. Dropped a 50-yard touchdown last week. If he catches that, he's probably extremely popular, but Judy's out, so more targets to go around, and I think he's just a really talented player. And then Donovan Peoples-Jones also, I think, is interesting. I played him last week. I had a couple rosters kind of pushing for that top 1%, but I missed in a spot, so I had to get off Marquez Callaway or Elijah Moore. So I swapped to DPJ, and that did not work out well. But he played a lot more snaps than Anthony Schwartz. I think DPJ had a 80% snap rate or something like that. So interested in him as well from that bargain range.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. Peoples-Jones. Again, Anthony Schwartz is also banged up. He has a knee injury, and I think that he's also in play well at 3,300. We know the Browns are going to score a lot of points in this game, and I just thought it was interesting. I talked about this on the injury pod where Schwartz exclusively lined up in 11 personnel and 13 personnel, which again, 13 personnel is 3 tight ends, which the Cleveland Browns will run at a time because they have Harrison Bryant and Njoku and Hooper. And it actually makes a lot of sense that they would kind of put a bunch of big bodies in the box and just split out Schwartz wide. This guy is fast as lightning. So they can run, hard play action. And this dude could be halfway down the field by the time Baker Mayfield looks up and 80-yard touchdown, bomb. So I think that Schwartz, if he's healthy, good look, man. If you're a rookie and you just get targets immediately in your first NFL game, that means something. And I know that we don't always want to, is it a fluke? But what's happening, I think we're more hesitant to buy into things when the evidence is clear. It's this guy was a rookie and he got a bunch of targets and air yards in his first game. Buy. So I like Schwartz a lot. I don't think we should be shying away thinking it's a fluke. It's not going to happen again. He was a part of their offensive game plan. He was getting end arounds. He was getting targets from Baker Mayfield. That doesn't just happen on a whim. So I think Schwartz at 3,300, again, if he plays, is an interesting, especially if we start to see rostership centered towards a Cedric Wilson, Jalen Guyton. I think I like more than Cedric Wilson just straight up. And then Peoples-Jones obviously would be the play, especially if Schwartz is made inactive. I think, that means, because it's we thought Peoples-Jones was going to be the guy, but then Schwartz is nah, it's me, dude. It's the beat reporters lied to me. Shocker, surprise. They've been lying to us all year long with a bunch of this stuff. So I think I like that there. Marquez Callaway. So everybody played him last week. He bombed. But you go back to him this week for the Carolina Panthers. I also like Darnell Mooney at 4,200. He popped as a guy that scored a lot of expected fantasy points last week. His matchup is significantly better against the Bengals than it was last week against the Rams. He was just one of 5 wide receivers to play on 100% of his team's dropbacks. We saw one of those receivers play last night, Terry McLaurin, and he had a monster game. Cooper Kupp was one of the other receivers, and he already had his monster game. So 4,200, those are guys that not a lot of people are going to play. Mooney's off the radar for everybody, but we know he's a super talented player, and he definitely makes a lot of unique builds as someone's part of the Bears. It's just not a lot of people are going to play Bears players anyway.
Yeah, I think in like that like cheap range, you want one of two things. You want someone who's really fast and can like catch like a 60-yard touchdown, like a KJ Hamler, like an Anthony Schwartz, like a Deshaun Jackson as like a one-off piece, or you're looking to like grab a piece of like a game stack. So like if you're stacking up the Vikings and Cardinals, like AJ Green is down there. As disgusting as
Oh my
that
God, no,
sounds.
AJ Green was getting like decent.
No, I know. I
I
agree
just,
with you.
dude, no, like you can't play bad play. It's okay. It's hard enough to try to figure out which good players to play together. Like that should be your goal. It's much harder to put together a great lineup when you're putting bad players in it by choice. So it's like like that's what I'm saying. Like I hate to be the guys like just play the best plays, but it's like you got to focus on playing the good players in spots that make sense, and you play good players that are low rostered. You don't just play a low roster player because he's low roster. You play a low roster player that's good, like that just happens to be low rostered. So again, AJ Green, I cannot get behind. He's dust.
I agree with you, but I was fiddling around with Cardinals and Vikings game stacks earlier, and those players are expensive, and you need cheapies in there. So he caught my also Emmanuel Sanders also is kind of interesting.
Yeah,
I
I'm
think
worried.
Gabriel Davis may not play.
I'm worried that Emmanuel Sanders is AJ Green from last year.
They might be,
He's
but
just
people are very ageist playing DFS.
I mean, he's 34. I mean, he had a ton of targets last week. Didn't do anything with them. All I'm saying is I did my high value opportunity report, and it was basically the week one write up for Emmanuel Sanders. It was almost a carbon copy of my week one write up for AJ Green. I'm like, guys, buy low on this dude. He saw a bunch of air yards week one, some end zone targets. Like this is AJ Green still got it. And then I had to make a disclaimer. I was like, yes, like air yards, predictive of future success, unless your name is AJ Green and your hashtag dust. Like that's what I saw from Emmanuel Sanders. So I'm off the Sanders train. Maybe I'm wrong, but I would rather just play Cole Beasley because everyone hates him. So and Cole Beasley is at 3%, 13 targets last week, 13 targets for Cole. He also gets Nick Needham in the slot, terrible slot cornerback for the Miami Dolphins. I'm gonna play Cole Beasley, and because no one wants to play him because of his off the field issues, even though he just continues to produce on the field, especially in DraftKings PPR scoring, where Cole Beasley just can rack up 10 catches for 60 yards, 16 points. If he falls in the end zone, boom, you got a guy that has 23 fantasy points.
Yep. Also, speaking of slot receivers, Tyler Boyd has the same matchup that Cooper Kupp had over the weekend, and he's really cheap. So Tyler Boyd's interesting as like a one-off piece, I think.
Tyler Boyd. I'm trying to think if there's anybody else that really caught my eye. Again, I think you do want to focus on stacks. I think Justin Jefferson, he was someone that popped out of my high opportunities model.
Oh yeah,
my thing where he should have scored way more touchdowns than he did last week, and he's also his rush is really, really low. He's sub 4%.
Jefferson.
Yeah.
Oh my God, that's amazing.
He's at sub. And Adam Thielen was way higher. I think people are just like, oh, I guess we were wrong. Adam Thielen's still the alpha. I could not disagree with that take
amazing
anymore off. So yes, Jefferson, you want to play him. So do you have a lean with Lockett or Metcalf? I know Lockett went off last week. So does it just automatically mean it's a Metcalf week? Because it seems like that's what everybody else thinks too, because Metcalf has higher rostership than Tyler Lockett. I mean, it's actually pretty close. It's 11 versus 8. So,
yeah, I mean, AJ Brown is in this game, so DK Metcalf, is going to show up and be like, "I want the ball."
Okay, you're
impress
right.
my boy.
I have to. Yes, any DK Metcalf stacks have to feature AJ Brown wide receiver 1 season stacks.
Yes, they do.
Because that's like that. That's not even just like, hey, this could win me a lot of money, but this is like that could just be freaking epic. Like these two dudes could just want to like put up massive numbers to show off to each other. I didn't even think that is a great point, Jared. I love that. Yeah, you're right. Fade Lockett, not happening. DK Metcalf game. It makes so much sense, especially because Lockett went off last week anyway. It makes a lot of sense to be Metcalf. AJ Brown. Yeah, and I think Julio Jones too.
Is easy sometimes. All you need to know is when two old college roommates are facing off against each other.
Yes. Oh man, I think that's pretty much it. I've basically hit on most of the receivers I like. Is there anyone else that's sticking? I know we don't have as many value plays. I know we talked about some of the 3K guys and some of the low 4K guys, but is there anybody else we want to talk about. I'm trying to look at the rostership right now. I mean, most of it's kind of just like, okay, if you're playing Kyler Murray, like you're playing DeAndre Hopkins, like kind of self-explanatory stuff. I think Jamar Chase is just he's really underpriced at 5K, 8 at 9%. So I think that's a solid cash play. Jarvis Landry's at 7%. He's still kind of expensive, but Odell Beckham's out and he's been really solid when OBJ's been out. But anybody else?
No, I think we covered most of the good receivers anyway.
Cool. All right, and also Jacoby Myers will catch a touchdown. I book it. It's happening. He's gonna finally catch a receiving touchdown in his NFL career. It has yet to happen, but it's gonna happen. All right, let's go to tight end as we wrap up here. Darren Waller, 7,600. Darren 20 target Waller.
Insane. Absolutely insane.
Dude, I was telling people this. If you had watched Raiders games last year, when I went back and watched Brian Edwards and Henry Ruggs, this was the same stuff he was doing last year. It was just like Waller all the time. So, but he's really expensive. 7,600. I was actually able to do kind of a build where I kind of made him fit in, but for the most part, I did not like the rest of my lineup. It does not really work, do you think, with the way that your lineup should do, especially if you want to go without these stacks? So chances are you're not like stacking this Raiders Steelers game.
Mm-hmm.
So again, I can see people skinny stacking it with a Darren Waller, one of the Steelers receivers, or Najee Harris, because Waller is basically just a wide receiver. What are your thoughts on Waller? Or just
I mean, tight end is just like, it's just so tough. And Waller, it's only Waller and Kittle of the big three, so you're not competing with Kelsey for a huge score. And if Waller goes for 30 points and no other tight end gets more than 20, that could be just like such a huge advantage for the rest of your roster. So if you can make it work and squeeze in a couple cheap receivers and like a Nyheim Hines or like a Chase Edmonds or something in the right game stack, it could work. It's probably not going to be like a major focus of mine because I'd rather stack up the other games with the expensive pieces than key in on Waller. I think the Steelers defense is really good. The Raiders are on the road. Like Carr could just as easily lay an egg. So I'd probably lean against playing Waller this week. I'd consider pairing him with Deontay Johnson, who I mentioned I liked earlier, but I think it's going to be tough to find the salary this week because there's so many studs that you want to play. And I think the odds are probably pretty high. The Raiders just had a friggin' awesome win on Monday night. Like, it just seems like such a letdown spot for the Raiders going on the road to Pittsburgh that I don't know if I'm going to get on Waller this week.
All right. So when it comes to punts, we look at routes run here at PFF, and James O'Shaughnessy, the routes run savant, 44 routes run. He also had a bunch of targets. He's my punt. Jacksonville Jaguars.
What's his price? 2.7K. Wow.
Dude, he had I think 8 targets last week, 10 targets. Jacksonville's going to throw because they're going to be behind Denver. Denver has a really good secondary, good cornerbacks. That means he's going to target the middle of the field. I
like that call.
I like O'Shaughnessy. Look, we've seen a person win $1 million with the Jacksonville Jaguars tight end. We talked about
Tyler Eifert. Yes. What a day that was.
We talked about it. And why did he play him? Because he ran freaking routes. That's why he played him. And that's why I'm playing James O'Shaughnessy at 2,700.
I love that.
He can get you all the studs you want at the other positions. I get that there are some 4K receivers. The guy that's really flying under the radar that just seems like a player that makes way too much, it's Gronk. 4.7. So he's in that middle tier where it seems like rostership is kind of fading. Oh, well, Gronk's old. He scored those touchdowns on Thursday night. He's not going to do it again. That's kind of at least that's what I'm getting the feeling about Gronk from the rostership projections. And I think that's the wrong way to look at it. I think it's like, Gronk is like healthy right now. Brady is cooking right now. They're going to score 1 billion points against the Falcons. And Gronk could be the potential way that you skinny stack this game. Instead of using like Mike Evans, you do Gronk and Ridley. It opens up because this way, Gronk has the potential. If Gronk scores touchdowns, he could outscore Waller. Like, he's probably one of the few guys that's in this price range. Again, Tyler Higbee obviously is really appealing at 4,100 as well. But Gronk at 4%, I like a lot.
Yeah, tight end is pretty ugly. I love the O'Shaughnessy call. I feel like this is a slate where you can get away with just like punting
yes,
and just hoping for 10 fantasy points out of your 3K tight end. Like, that might be enough. Kittle's interesting, as upside. I think he had like 180 yards against the Eagles last year.
Yep. Yeah, he had a massive game.
After Raheem Mostert, after Trey Sermon was ruled inactive last week, I slacked you. I was like, Mostert is going to be too much chalk. Like, we need to find a 49ers pass catcher. So, of course, I picked George Kittle instead of Deebo Samuel.
It means you got to go back to it.
Yeah. So I have to play Kittle this week. I think I'd actually rather play him than Waller and like take the savings.
I like that. I mean, look, we talked about Kittle and Waller having very similar upside profiles, throughout the season-long draft. Some people even had Kittle ranked higher than Waller. I was on the side of Waller because of his targets, but Kittle's always been the more efficient pass catcher. And yes, his routes run last week were abysmal. He ran like 18 routes, which sucks, but he also still had he still caught a bunch of passes because when he runs routes, he gets targeted. Like Garoppolo is looking for him when he gets the ball. So he lit up the Eagles last time. And there's still nobody on the Eagles defense that can cover George Kittle or the tight end position at all. They don't have really good linebackers. So I like George Kittle there as well. I also think, as I mentioned, Kyle Pitts. Look, he didn't produce last week, but his rostership is going to be cut in half from what was last week because people are going to disappoint. His price is up. It makes too much sense playing in a high-scoring game. You pair him with, again, it's kind of like the reverse. So instead of doing, Ridley Gronk, you do Pitts, Evans, something like that, where you're getting exposure to that Bucks-Falcons game. If you're not full stacking it, you pair that along with one of your as a mini stack, which I think is a really interesting way because there are so many good games here. There is ways that you can kind of finagle your lineup to get exposure to every single game. I mean, not necessarily that you need to do that, but there are going to be points scored. And just because one game shoots out, that doesn't necessarily stop another game from shooting out. They actually have nothing to do with each other. So it is a good way to kind of get exposure to some of these high-powered games. Because, look, they're not all going to hit the under. So that's for certain. Like there are going to be games that score a lot of points. So it kind of gives you more opportunities to find those points with your lineup.
There's a lot of these cheap tight ends also that you can correlate into your stacks really beautifully. Like if you're stacking up Chargers Cowboys, you can play Jared Cook, you can play Dalton Schultz, and they're below 4K. If you're stacking up Russ, you can pair him with Gerald Everett. If you're stacking up Kirk Cousins or Kyler Murray, you can get Tyler Conklin in there. And all these guys are so cheap. I think that is probably the way I'm going to play it. And then if I'm looking for like an expensive one-off, then maybe George Kittle or Gronk.
Mm-hmm. All right, let's move on to the final position, our favorite, DST. Jets kind of come out as basically the cheapest defense I think that you can play in like kind of stomach because they're playing.
Oh my God, they're the highest. That's
why. That's
crazy.
I know when I talked to Ian, we kind of settled more on the Eagles defense actually being like the defense we would settle on. We look at, Jimmy Garoppolo. He's not like this guy is like flawless. We saw the 49ers make a lot of mistakes last week against Jared Goff. So I think that Philadelphia and the Eagles defense shut down the Falcons, like straight up. They played well last week. So Eagles at 2,400. I mean, if I have the salary, I would gladly move off a Jets 11% or like super chalky Jets defense for an Eagles defense that looks like it's less than 1%, where I really honestly don't see the difference in their range of outcomes, where the Jets is like, the Jets is like a smash play. It's like they're just playing a rookie quarterback. Okay. Well, the 49ers or the Eagles are playing a quarterback that the team tried to replace with a rookie quarterback. So, I mean, Garoppolo could definitely throw a couple picks, take some sacks. The Eagles have a good defensive line. So I think that makes sense. And then the defense I love the most for tournaments, I think, is the Chargers. I freaking love the Chargers. They're sub 1%. No one's going to play them because they're playing Dallas. And that's exactly why people didn't play Arizona last week, because it was a shootout. Even though we see this all the time, the DSTs that play in the shootouts score fantasy points. It happens all the freaking time.
Oh, I played the Titans last week. RIP to my rosters.
You just played the wrong one. So when I look at the Chargers defense, I know they have playmakers. They have Joey Bosa. They have Derwin James. Asante Samuel Jr. is going to be a playmaker in the future. And we know that Dak's going to have to throw. He's more likely to have to be playing from behind. They're underdogs. He could potentially take more sacks. There is no La'el Collins. So I think that, and especially with that, I talked to you, how Brandon Staley is kind of almost inviting you to check down and to be more conservative. Dak might be like, no, like I want to throw it deep, man. I want to throw it deep. And he might try to test things when the coverage doesn't necessarily dictate it. So I think that could lead to interceptions. I really like the chart. I I think you can play them in any formats. I'm not afraid because never do we see defenses ever score fantasy points because they shut out another team. Like that doesn't happen. So I feel good about the Chargers defense as a tournament play, sub 1%. They're 2,600 too, so it's not like they're expensive either. Instead of like paying up for like Saints, Steelers, Patriots. Again, we understand why those teams are expensive, but we see this all the time. Paying up for defense, like 9 times out of 10 doesn't work because they all have the same ceiling. They all have the same range of outcomes. So I'm going to pay down the Chargers. No one's going to play them. And I think that they have a game script where you could see them having a high ceiling game.
I love that Chargers call. Cowboys just lost another offensive lineman today also. And it's just fantastic leverage if you're stacking up the Seahawks or stacking up the Cardinals. Just play the Chargers D, and then you don't even have to worry about that Chargers-Cowboys game because you're basically just saying that game disappoints anyway. Some of the other ones that I was thinking of, I would go back to the Titans. I mean, you see these like random games where Russ's offensive line just like implodes and he gets sacked 8 times. He holds the ball, like that happens randomly. So the Titans are really cheap. I would play them. I was looking at the Bears defense also. Not really a shootout, but Bengals have a ton of question marks on their line. And, anytime you got Khalil Mack coming at the quarterback, some crazy things could happen. Burrow's not as mobile as he probably should be. Seahawks defense is also probably pretty interesting. Titans did not play well last week, so maybe they don't play well again. And on the expensive side, nobody really stuck out to me too much. I don't really want to pay up for any of those defenses. It just doesn't seem worth the money because this week you really want to pay up for these high total games.
Because you want to jam in. It's so weird how far we've come from I don't want to play 3 running backs. No, I do not want to play 3 running backs. I'm just trying to get by on running back. It's funny. Last week there was actually a pricing error with one of the running backs for the Bills. It was Reggie Gillum, who I think is their fullback. He was priced at 2,500. And I was trying to think of wait, if I play him as a punt, is there a way to finagle?
Did he score any fantasy points? No.
I was trying to figure out a way. It was he's priced incorrectly for some reason. I don't know why he's priced 2,500. He would score 0 points, but if I play him, can I now unlock a lineup? I mean, look, I lost to somebody in a tournament that played freaking Wayne Gallman, who was inactive, and I was tilting my face off. I'm like, oh my God, what have I done? What am I doing with my life? I just lost someone playing Wayne Gallman. Oh man. But Patriots defense, I think because the Patriots defense, all it does is all the time. How many times have we talked about the Patriots? Oh, Patriots defense broke the slate. Again, there was that streak where they played for 9 straight weeks where if you didn't play them, you literally were not winning any money. And it was super annoying because you're you got to pay it from Pat's D in cash. It's
Rookie QB, Patriots just lost. They got to win this game. Yeah. I definitely don't hate that. I'd rather play Patriots than Jets than the chalky Jets defense.
Rather play Patriots. Again, obviously they're really expensive, so it does make your roster, I think, a little bit different. But if you feel more comfortable paying down, I mean, look, receiver is more volatile. So if you can find, again, we talked about these 5K receivers. Again, most of the receivers that people are going to kind of gravitate towards are all in the 6K range. So if you can find a pivot from one of these 6K receivers to one of the 5K receivers, you move up a defense. I think it makes your lineup very different. But yeah, I think you brought up a good point, Jared, where, build the chalky lineup and then figure out, okay, all right, just build just copy all the highest roster players in your lineup. Okay, this is what everyone's going to play. Now, how do I differentiate without making a terrible lineup and just playing bad players? How can I change it up? So I think that's a good exercise that people could do. I think that's it. I know we have a couple questions here in the chat. I just want to address some of these. Let me get these. All right. Angel asked about Najee or David Montgomery. I think I mentioned this already in the last chat that we did. It was Najee, Kenyon Drake for Jacoby Myers in a trade. Jared, would you trade Kenyon Drake for Jacoby Myers right now?
So I'm getting Jacoby Myers?
Yes.
I'd probably rather have Kenyon Drake. I mean, who knows what the deal with Josh Jacobs' injury is? So maybe you're getting a starting running back. Jacoby Myers is fine. He's wide receiver 3, a flex guy.
Cooper Kupp or Keenan Allen? I'm going with Keenan Allen.
Oh yeah, Keenan, easy.
That's easy. Mike Evans or Mike Williams for week 2. Again, if this is a season-long league, I'm playing Mike Evans, and then in DFS, it really depends on how your roster is constructed. Yeah. Again, in a vacuum, I'm going to take Mike Evans.
Agreed.
9 times out of 10. It's kind of funny because basically Mike Evans isn't playing Trevon Diggs this week, and that's who is supposed to line up with Mike Williams this week. So theoretically, yes, Mike Williams could bust. And also, someone else brought up another point that Mike Williams like has this affinity of like leaving games like all the time because he gets banged up. And I got so scared for a second. I'm like, oh my God, he's gonna leave this game like halfway through, and Jalen is just gonna have a monster, or it's gonna be Josh Palmer or somebody that's gonna have a monster game because he gets hurt. Oh, please, Mike Williams, stay healthy. All right, last question. Okay, so last question. I have Nick Chubb starting with James Robinson. Do I dare swap Robinson and put Kareem Hunt in his place for this week until we see if Robinson? I would just play both Browns running backs. I think that they're just gonna that way. Like you win either way. I feel like you can't lose. Whereas James Robinson, we're like maybe he'll have more carries than Carlos Hyde. Maybe he'll catch passes. We don't really know. Yeah, I would just play both Browns running backs.
What is Urban Meyer doing? He should just take the USC job to save us fantasy players. Like
at least Daryl Bevel can like run an offense and be just be like, all right, just cut out one of these Jag receivers. Just make two. Just like literally make one of them inactive, just so we can have concentrated target share. Keep it up. All right, that's gonna wrap us up. Jared, final, takeaway, like favorite stack, whatever. Final thoughts.
All right, final thoughts is the Millie Maker winning lineup this week will be a Russell Wilson or Ryan Tannehill plus AJ Brown plus DK Metcalf stack.
So enticing. All right, I'm gonna go with Justin Herbert as my quarterback to be. Double stack with Keenan Allen, Jalen Guyton. I love you, Mike Williams, but there are some holes in your game now that I've done more research. Even though you're probably, I'm gonna play you. I'm gonna play you in some lineups. I'm just going to, but I'll go with Jalen Guyton, Keenan Allen, bring it back with Lamb and Zeke, and then I'll just either do a DK Metcalf. I don't even know if I have any more wide receiver slots available. DK Metcalf, AJ Brown, or Ridley, Gronk, Mike Evans combination. So that's what I'm going to try to do.
Oh my God. I'm so happy you brought up Chargers defense because I am building so many Chargers defense.
Dude,
Russell Wilson and Ryan Tannehill stacks. It's going to be beautiful.
So much sense.
It's so much sense. It's
especially
fantastic.
because we know the Chargers defense has. It's not like you're playing the Raiders defense where they have no good players. Like
you're playing a good defense, like a legit NFL defense.
On paper, we talk about this every single season before the season starts. Like, Chargers defense on paper so good. And they all get hurt. And it's
Come on, Derwin, pick six. Let's go.
Dude, they have the guys to make plays, and we know Dak's going to throw the ball a ton. It's not like Dak is not one to like turn the ball over. Like he throws turnovers, he throws picks. He's really good because he throws a lot. So I think Chargers defense, that's my call. Chargers defense, DST that breaks the slate. I cannot guarantee you that my other positions will be accurate, but Chargers defense, I think, will be the play. Good luck to everybody. Thank you all for watching. We'll be back next week. I don't know what the time is. I got some traveling I got to do, so we'll figure it out. But either way, good luck to everybody this weekend. Should be fun. Should be high
scoring. Some money.
And make sure you late swap, please late swap, especially with this slate where you're going to be playing a lot of guys at the later end. You have to realize that if you play a couple guys in the beginning games and they all suck, then going Dallas Chargers stacks probably isn't going to help you very much. So make sure to pivot to more contrarian approaches if your teams aren't doing so hot in the early window, vice versa. If your contrarian takes do well in the beginning, you can hire more chalky lineups like Jonathan Taylor. Like if Jonathan Taylor goes off in the early window, you're like, oh man, this could be a great week. So we shall see. But thank you all for watching.